right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for wherever you are. Happy 1-year anniversary. 1 year ago today, Stats Perform officially became a company together with Stats and Perform joining together. And since the merger, we've successfully brought together teams and offices and people, goals, leadership, everything. And I think what we've accomplished in this year together is nothing short of remarkable. Now we've had some recent challenges, but to the world, but I think that we've been able to maintain that momentum despite those challenges and keep working together to accomplish some amazing things. And I think a few of you guys have heard me talk about rowing the boat and getting the oars in the water. And that is such an important message because every single person in this company has played a role in our success so far and will play a role in our success going forward. And it's that working together that's so important. It's how we win. It's how we dominate the sports tech market. It's how we become a championship team ourselves. So we thought it would be great to kick off our celebrations today with a little inspiration. So I was thinking, have you ever wondered what it's like to be on a championship team? What it's like to be inside the locker room? What did they do right in terms of a team and a culture and leadership? We're actually going to give you that inside view today. So we're really excited to have Ben Utecht here. He's one of the perfect people to give that perspective, being on a championship team himself. So Ben was a tight end on the 2007 NFL Championship Indianapolis Colts, playing under the Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy, and also lining up next to future Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning. So a few of those names might be familiar to you. I know not all of you are American football fans, but I think Ben's perspective is far less about American football and more about what kind of culture and leadership and teaming did it take to win, to pull together that team around a common goal of winning, and what made them different. So it's a great story, even if the story about winning is against the Chicago Bears. And Ben is not only an accomplished football player, he's also an accomplished singer, which you'll hear a little bit about in his video, as well as if you haven't heard his TED Talk, I think it's an extremely inspirational TED Talk about memories and the effect on your lives and some of the challenges Ben had because of his concussions over his career. I've actually heard Ben speak before. I think his message will resonate with many of you. So I'm hoping that you get a chance to sit back and relax, hear the message about leadership and teaming and what it takes to be a champion, messages that we hope we will bring forward in our everyday lives. And what we have a unique opportunity to actually interact with Ben. In fact, I know he loves this. So we will ask you to put your questions and we will try and get to them, as many of them as possible. So I'm excited and I will now turn it over to Ben and take it away. Ben, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you to the entire executive team, Stats Perform, Carl. Thank you for the opportunity. Welcome to my home in Minnesota. It's the first of its kind for me. I am excited to bring you here. Usually I'm on a stage, as we all know, at these big annual events, but due to our current COVID culture that we have internationally, it needs to change. And so welcome into my home. And Nancy, what do you mean not everybody's an NFL football fan? Come on, people. I mean, look, if you're a sports person, you have to be an NFL fan. I'm a fan of Premier Soccer. I'm a fan of rugby. I'm a fan of cricket. You can be a fan of the NFL too. It's really one of the greatest team sports in the world. And I'm excited to bring you into the locker room, to bring you on the sideline and give you a unique perspective into the culture of a Super Bowl championship team. Before I do that, I thought about this as I was, researching and learning more about your incredible company. And I came to this realization that my life, my individual personal life, was transformed forever by Stats. I'll never forget, as I came out of my 4 years in Indianapolis and I had an opportunity to go on and to be the star tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. And as I went into that negotiation process with my agent, every leverage point that we had in that negotiation to set me up with a contract that would forever change my life and that would forever change my family's life was all dependent on stats. And because we were able to pull out very unique information, very unique data from my performance on the field that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see, we were able to leverage the opportunity for me to sign an incredible contract and really set the tone for the rest of my life. So I thought that might be a unique perspective for you to hear, that sometimes you get lost in the sea of data, and it might not always feel like what you're giving the world matters, but it actually does. And in some situations, the data and the statistics that you're going to provide will actually change individual players' lives. And so on that point, thank you for what you do. You make the game incredibly fun, and that's what we need sports to really always be about. So my goals today are really simple. It's to give you a perspective, a unique perspective on the kind of the infamous, the paradoxical idea of culture. It's so hard to put a finger on, but I was a part of an incredible team that figured out how to decide, design, deploy, and direct culture across an entire sports organization, which led to the highest output of performance and ultimately a Super Bowl championship. So before we dive into that, I want to give you just a little bit of more context about who I am and where I came from. And so here is a video that I'm going to share with you guys that will give you just a little bit more perspective on what has been going on in my life. So here we go.
Once upon a time I had a life by my design. The world was in my hands and all the stars aligned. And then my world began to spin outside of my control. I'm back into a corner now, and I will fight to show I'm here, standing strong, standing tall enough to overcome it all. I'm still here, holding on, rising up to find what holds me down. Here I am forever standing
So that gives you a little glimpse into my athletic and career after athletics. I always love watching that video because I sometimes you have to start at the beginning, and the more grainy footage that you saw in that video was the first scene coming out of high school that really sent me onto college and onto the NFL. Unfortunately, my career came to an end in 2009 due to my 5th documented concussion. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the effect that concussions have had worldwide on sports. In every single sport, it has now become a focus on player health and safety. And due to the effects that concussions had on my life, it really sent me into a world of philanthropy and advocacy for the health of players' brains and their mind and their memories. And as Nancy mentioned, that's where my TED Talk takes place. And as you saw in some of these, in some of the footage on the video, I have spent a lot of time in the public eye, and also speaking to Congress, which is basically our government, our parliament, and having an opportunity to really do some great work in taking care of our athletes and their mind and their memories. And then most importantly, and I know you saw this on the last picture, was that I'm a family man all the way through. And I'm the lucky and blessed father of 4 beautiful girls. And so we don't have a football player in the family, but we definitely have girls that love sports, and being a dad is really where the most important form of culture and leadership really lives. And so, well, I'm excited to take you through this journey. Now, let me just give you a little bit of a perspective, okay? 1% of every Division I, so Division I colleges in America, that's the highest level of college sports. 1% of every Division I athlete, Division I football player, 1% goes on to play in the NFL. And so that should tell you the type of athlete and the level of talent and ability that is at that level. 1% makes it to the NFL. And I was fortunate to be on a team that had some of that incredible talent. Now, what made it really unique was it was built around a culture created by Tony Dungy. And Tony Dungy is a Hall of Fame NFL football coach. And what made Tony so unique was that he spotlighted a new style of leadership on a national stage, and that was called servant leadership. It was built around this idea that if you build better men, you will get better football players. If I improve the human condition at work, then I will improve the performance on the field. And that was radically new to me. You know, usually you come up in sports and so many of the programs kind of come out of this fear-based model, right? That we're going to break you down in order to build you up. Whereas the Tony Dungy model was, I'm going to pour into you so that I can get the best out of you. Because if I gain your respect, if I gain your loyalty, if I gain your commitment, you will play harder for me, and it will be more sustainable over time than anything else. And so my goal today is to just give you this unique perspective. Now, you got to understand, this is my experience in the NFL, and sharing with you the template that was practiced, the belief system that was practiced out of a very specific NFL football team. It's going to be different for you. Okay, I know you've heard this from Carl, you heard it from Nancy. There's a culture in Stats Perform around rowing the boat. And there's something very powerful in that. Now, you also have a lot of subcultures because you're all across the world, and that's going to create different unique cultures that are underneath the umbrella of Stats Perform. It's the same in an NFL locker room. And so my goal today is to just give you a unique perspective into how one team built a culture that led to an ultimate championship outcome. And you're going to be on a journey as a young company to be able to do the same thing. As I talked about these 4 Ds, to decide, design, deploy, and direct a culture, right, that is going to have an effect on the human condition all over the world in your company. And from the bottom up, every individual, the responsibility of every individual, every team member, to buy into that belief system, to practice that, to achieve the ultimate outcome, which is to be a successful organization, but to do it the right way. And as Tony Dungy would say, to build a family. So let's go on this journey together. And I can't wait for you to share your comments, to share your questions. I think one of the best things that we can do in this time together is be inspired, to challenge each other, to ask great questions, and to learn together so that we can leave this going out wanting to make a better culture. So here we go. It was 1960, and the United States of America was involved in a very important race against Russia to be the first country to put a man on the moon. Now, there's an infamous story, and I love this story. President John F. Kennedy was touring NASA, and as he was walking down the halls of NASA, he came across a janitor, and he stopped and introduced himself to the janitor, the man who was working so hard to clean the floors of our space and naval organization in the United States. And he introduces himself to this janitor, and he says, sir, let me ask you a question. What is your job here at NASA? And without skipping a beat, the janitor looked at the president and said, Mr. President, my job is to put a man on the moon. How powerful is that? The man who walked, I think it was 7 miles to get to work that day, and who had a mop, and he was working so hard on that floor to make it as clean as possible. And when the president asked him, what is your job here? He said, my job is to put a man on the moon. Imagine the belief system in that organization that was built so that every single employee who bought into that belief system answered the question the same way. Fast forward to 2007, Super Bowl 41. Just to give you some context, this is like the World Cup. This is like the World Cup of rugby or soccer. This is the biggest game in the world revolved around NFL football. Over 101 million people tuned in to watch that game. It was one of only two Super Bowls in the history of football to rain. And when you're losing in the rain, it's no fun. But when you're beating the Chicago Bears, sorry, Nancy, I apologize. But when you're beating the Chicago Bears, it's a lot of fun. Okay, and I'll never forget this. We were in the Miami Dolphins Stadium. So imagine a stadium with about 80,000 fans. And there was a cool Miami, Florida mist filling the Dolphins Stadium at that time. Our all-pro place kicker, okay, this is like our striker. This is the one player on our team that has the ability to kick the football. And he can do it in a number of different ways. He can score points for us, but he also moves the ball down the field. And so the opening kickoff is where our striker, it's where our kicker kicks the ball all the way down to the other end of the field. And that's the chance, that's the start of the game. That's the chance for the opposing team to catch that football and to advance it forward on the football field. And I was standing in between Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy on my right and future Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning on my left, two of the greatest NFL people in history. And I'm watching my all-pro place kicker, Adam Vinatieri, who'd already won 3 Super Bowls with the New England Patriots. Okay, this is one of the best kickers in all of football. And he's getting ready for the whistle to blow so that he can kick the ball to the other end of the field. And I remembered something Adam told our team 2 weeks before the Super Bowl. He said, men at kickoff, don't blink. Don't you dare blink. But he didn't tell us why. So fast forward, here we are back at the Miami Stadium. Adam Vinatieri has his hand raised, getting our team ready for the kickoff. The referee blows the whistle, and Adam drops his hand and he releases the Colts, all of our players, all 11 players on the field. And he kicks that ball perfectly, soaring into the upper atmosphere of this stadium. And you guys, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Don't blink. Don't you dare blink. So you better believe, even though now that mist had turned into side rain and it was slamming into our faces and hard to keep your eyes open, you better believe I was on the sideline, eyes wide open, because I had never experienced so many flashing lights in one moment in time. And I know if you've ever seen a championship sporting event, okay, at the start of the play, to see 80,000 flashing cameras go off at one time, it's truly magical. It feels like you're in outer space amongst the stars. In that moment, it was the best athletic moment of my life. Then that football came out of those flashing lights and it landed into the hands of the Chicago Bears' most talented kickoff return man, okay? Devin Hester. Devin Hester caught the football on the end goal line, and he ran it all the way back on the first play of the game. It has never happened in NFL history that he ran the football 100 yards all the way across the field. So you can imagine that it went from being the greatest athletic moment of my life to the worst athletic moment of my life in about 5 seconds. And if I'm being honest with you, I'm watching the celebration of this touchdown. You know, that's what we call it when the football goes into the end zone and they score. It's called a touchdown. And you can imagine the Chicago Bears are celebrating that touchdown. And if I'm being completely vulnerable with you, okay, in that moment, I just felt an incredible amount of fear. I thought to myself, this doesn't happen. I'm sure that this is going to foreshadow the rest of the game. You know, the gods must be on their side. You know, all of those kind of thoughts start, and I know because I've talked to Nancy about this too. She thought the same thing. She thought, yes, my team. And I look to my right and I see how my Hall of Fame coach is reacting. And he's not giving any credence. He's not paying attention to the celebration. It's as almost if the play didn't occur. He's already talking to his coaches in his headset. He's going over our scripted plays that our offense have prepared for the game, as if the play didn't even happen. Not an ounce of fear, not an ounce of concern or worry, just getting ready for the next play. And I look to my left, and there's my future Hall of Fame quarterback, Peyton Manning. And he's giving no credence to the celebration in the Chicago Bears end zone. He's talking to his offensive coordinator, Tom Moore. We're going over the first 5 scripted plays that we always had prepared for when we're going to take the field, getting ready for our offense to answer. And it was in that moment, you guys, that I was enraptured back into this championship culture that was built in Indianapolis, right? That was practiced in Indianapolis, that was believed in Indianapolis. And it led to us going out and winning 29-17 in the biggest game in the world on that night. And none of it happens. I submit to you today that the difference maker wasn't the individual talent. Both teams are incredibly talented. I submit to you that it was the chosen culture that was practiced in Indianapolis in order to create the strongest team, which led to the greatest performance on the field. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, okay, great stories, but what's the connection between 1960 and 2007? Here's the connection. If you were to go around and ask any personnel in the Indianapolis Colts organization, from the janitorial staff to facilities to equipment managers to our physicians and trainers, you know, to our administration and staff, marketing, all the way up to our owner, Jim Irsay. If you were to ask the question, what's your job here in Indianapolis? Every single one of those individuals would have responded with, it's to win a Super Bowl. Because there was a culture that was built around the fact that every single person mattered in that organization. Every single person was significant. Every single person brought a very important value to the team that ultimately is connected to performance, which led to a Super Bowl championship. How seriously our facilities took their job and created an environment for us as players to perform and to get better on the field is directly connected to whether or not we become a championship team in the end. So every single person, just like that janitor who said, my job, Mr. President, is to put a man on the moon, every single one in Indianapolis connected by the same belief system, which is that my job matters in order for us to go win a Super Bowl. And that really is the champion's way. That's what it comes down to. You're going to have a culture by design or default. You will. You will have a culture by design or default. So if you can design it, why not go for it? Put a value on it so that you can decide, design, deploy, and direct culture in your organization. So let's go through the program, which I call the Champion's Way, and give you a deep dive into what it actually looks like and how it was practiced in Indianapolis in order to achieve our highest performance. Let me start by asking you a question. Do you believe that what you believe directly affects how you behave? Just think about that for a moment. Do you believe that what you believe directly affects how you behave, how you perform every single day? You know, most companies are going to have a mission and a vision statement, and many companies have a value, a list of values that they believe are important. Okay, rarely do you find organizations that actually have a written out belief system. But here's why I asked the question, because they mean two different things. Values are behavioral principles that people believe are important. Beliefs are what are absolute truths. They're what people believe to be absolute truths. They're where values come from. So there's a foundational element that is created out of a belief system that can be practiced in order to achieve performance and to improve the human condition at work. So let me take you through that culture, the culture that was created by Tony Dungy, and then we can jump into some Q&A at the end. So let's start by defining what culture is. Culture in Indianapolis, okay, this was our definition for culture, is the result of a shared and practiced belief system that inspires the behaviors of people and organizations to pursue a defined mission and vision with unity and purpose. Okay, it's understanding that there's an intrinsic nature to the human condition. All of us have these foundationally intrinsic beliefs that drive our behavior, that drive our performance. And so together, if we can decide and design that, now we can all choose as members of that team to participate and to practice that, really creating that unity and that purpose around our mission and our vision. Here is basically what a belief system or a value system looked like in Indianapolis. These are examples of what was very important and what were often taught and what were often practiced. Accountability, humility, vulnerability, adaptability, courage, empathy, and believe it or not, grace. So let me just take you through these and just share with you what the belief system was that was created, the culture compact, if you will, that was created in Indianapolis, that we as members of that team had to commit to in order for us to achieve the outcomes that we wanted to. Many of these you are definitely going to have heard of because there's a lot of crossover into any industry, but accountability being very important, right? So this is what we believed about accountability. I believe elite accountability is any leader's or individual's commitment to accept responsibility for their performance, behavior, and also the performance and behavior of their team members. So how did we practice it? So we practiced that by something called the eye in the sky. Now, the eye in the sky is the reality that in football, and I know that this is true in all organized sports, but in football, every single minute of every single day was recorded. Every single minute of every single day was recorded. They even recorded team meetings to hold players accountable to not fall asleep. That's not a joke. And it actually happened. And a player was fined, I think, somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 US for taking a nap in a meeting. But that's how seriously they held accountability. So every single minute of every single day was filmed. Now, the purpose of that was so that we always have the opportunity to evaluate. We always have the opportunity to pull out our weaknesses, right? So that our coaches and so that all of our individual team members can begin to do whatever we can to turn those weaknesses into strengths. Because ultimately, if we're all working towards our potential, then we're going to have the best performance on the field. Humility. I believe effective leaders lead with humility. Humility is the willingness of the leader to subordinate his or her needs for status and glory to that of the team and its accountability to perform. I'll never forget my first team meeting with Tony Dungy. The foundation of that meeting was around building a family. And as you can imagine, in one of the roughest sports in the world, I thought to myself, man, I've never heard anybody say that the most important thing about hitting another person is that you do it by building a family. But Coach Dungy went on to explain what that actually means. So the acronym for family in football is forget about me, I love you. And you're thinking, what is that about? Well, really, it's about selflessness. It's about being selfless, because most of the time when we allow our egos to get in the way, it affects the relationship that we have with our team members, right? And that actually affects the outcome of performance. And so the way we practiced this in Indianapolis was through serving in the community. So Coach Dungy and our player development team committed themselves as a part of our culture to be the best team in the NFL that spends the most time out in the community serving other people. And when you serve other people, you learn what selflessness truly means, because you see how fortunate you are when you have to work to help people that don't have what you have. And so that was a unique perspective on how Coach Dungy was able to teach a group of 53 men what it actually means to be humble and to practice humility. How about vulnerability, right? How do you get a group of 53 of the roughest, strongest, fastest guys to be vulnerable? And why? Why would you want that? Well, I believe vulnerability is opening oneself up to the possibility of being emotionally wounded. The result, though, can be a deeper connection with your team members. Vulnerability equals connectivity. So how can you work to find ways to be more vulnerable with your team members, to let them in order to help them connect more? That was something that was really important. So much so that Coach Dungy created a small group network. This was an opportunity for offense and defense to get together off of the field, to get together outside of football, and to go across that offense and defensive line and meet with your team members, and go through some trust building and through some through getting to know each other better in order to build stronger relationships. Adaptability. I believe adaptability is the quality of being able to adjust to uncertain conditions, right? This is a part of any industry, and it's especially a part of the NFL. And this is one thing that I think is interesting for people to understand. When we go into training camp, we get our playbook, and our playbook is probably somewhere about 4 to 5 inches thick of just individual pieces of paper, that each paper has an individual play on it. But it goes much deeper than that. Each individual play has at least 8 different adaptations. So when you look at a play on one of those sheets, at the very top, you will see the play that we're going to run. But then you see 8 different ways that play can change in milliseconds. And so as a player, not only are you preparing for the foundational play, but you have to prepare to adapt to how the play can change based upon what the defense is showing you. Okay? And so we practice that every single day. So much of our practices and going through each of those individual plays are the coaching staff giving us all of the different ways that a defense can reveal themselves, so that we can get better and grow in our own adaptability. How about courage? I believe courage is the ability to do something in the face of uncertainty or fear. Listen, we have to be courageous every single day in this world, and in our businesses, in our lives. And how do you practice that? Well, they, in Indianapolis, encouraged rational risk-taking by all members. And here's what rational risk-taking is. It's where every team member gives everything they have every day to the fundamentals and the techniques. These are the little things that we have to do in order to win every single day. But you have to allow creativity, innovation to come out. For example, as a tight end or as a receiver, we are able to catch the football when our quarterback throws it in the air. Now, the fundamentals and techniques of catching a football are that you use both of your hands at all times to catch the football. But the reality is, in a game, you see incredible catches all the time where players are diving and they're making one-handed grabs, right? These are the highlights that we see on ESPN all the time. And you know that that's going to happen. And you encourage that, but it only comes out of the hours and hours spent doing the little things, right? All of the receivers staying after practice and going over to what we call the jugs machine. This is the machine that spins around and shoots out the footballs. And all of the receivers catching hundreds of those balls with one hand after the practice so that they can go be rational risk takers on the field. But courage is one of those things that really increases productivity and performance on the field in any industry and in any organization. Empathy, this is critical, you guys. Okay, I believe empathy is putting oneself in the position or shoes of another team member. And it really comes down to what makes you a champion foundational listener, right? Because it really is connected to selflessness, as we already talked about. And I'm going to actually take you in deeper into one of the main pillars of the Indianapolis Colts that revolves around listening here in just a moment. Now, this always shocks a lot of people, but this truly is the leadership style of Coach Dungy, right? This idea of grace, treating people with grace. I believe grace is practicing a disposition that acts with kindness. It leads with kindness, courtesy, clemency. Here's the thing. While demanding excellence, okay? While demanding excellence. That's so key, right? This behavior inspires loyalty and trust. Okay, and perfect example of that. We were playing the Tennessee Titans. I had a chance to score the winning touchdown, and I came off of the line of scrimmage after the quarterback had hiked the ball. I released upfield, and I came in contact with a linebacker, and I did something that I have never done before. And in every single practice, you practice the opposite, but for some reason I went up to that player and I pushed off of that player. It's illegal. It's a penalty. You can't do it. To this day, I don't know why, but I pushed off that player and then I ran the rest of my route. Peyton Manning threw the football, I caught it, and that would have won the game. But instead, the referee threw a flag. You can imagine it's just a deflating moment in my life as a player. And I'll never forget the next day after watching film, being confronted by Coach Dungy in the hallway. Okay, now he approached me with kindness, and in his calm kind of quietness that is really the way of Coach Dungy. He pulled me aside and he said, "Hey Ben, had a chance to watch that footage and look, you never make that mistake. You're a great player, but here's the deal. I expect that you will never let that happen again. And I expect that you will do what you practice on the field in order so that we can achieve, perform, and win the game." And so in that moment, he had a chance to really come at me and to make me feel small and to raise his voice, really what I had typically experienced from every other coach. But yet he came to me first with grace, at the same time telling me exactly what he expected and exactly what the consequences are going to be if something like that happens again. So grace can be powerful, and it really inspires respect. And if a coach can get respect, then he can get the best out of his players. And that was all connected to the coaching style of Tony Dungy. So really, so far, taking you through this template, if you will, of championship culture in Indianapolis is all to show you that culture wins, that you can choose it, and that it actually has an effect on your performance. So let me just take you through a few examples of winning culture, and even an example of what happens to culture when you start practicing a poor belief system. We're going to start with a really inspiring clip taken from a game where Michigan State defeats Penn State, two very high-profile colleges in America playing each other in a very big game, okay? And I want you to watch the reaction of the Penn State football coach at the end of this game after they've just lost the biggest game of the season.
And James Franklin livid about something.
So one of the things about that video that really sticks out to me is if you notice, if you were able to just look at the score, okay, what you saw was Penn State, who was ranked nationally at the number 17 team in the country, okay, top 10 football team. Michigan State ranked 24th in the country. So it was a huge upset for Penn State, okay? Now, what makes this even more interesting is that Penn State, a few years prior, completely fell apart because of the incredibly poor behavior of a coaching staff that totally dismantled the entire organization. And it had to be built back from ground up. And so Penn State hired Coach James Franklin, a coach known to believe in a very believed in a very well-designed culture built on principles of leadership like integrity and character. One of the belief systems of Penn State is that no matter what happens at the end of the game, no matter the outcome, win or lose, we will go over and shake the hands of our opponents. And Coach Franklin noticed that two of his players were beginning to run off the field without shaking the hands of the opponent. And so what you saw was him sprinting down to the end of the field. This is a coach on national television, millions of people watching this game. And on national television, he sprints down to hold his players accountable to practice the belief system of Penn State. And he got to those players, and obviously he wasn't happy, so he was raising his voice and he was saying, go back and practice what we believe on this team. And because of that, Penn State is now in the top 10 of college football every single year due to the practicing of a well-designed and chosen belief system.
Row the boat. Row the boat is a never give up mantra. There's 3 parts to rowing the boat. One is the oar. The oar is the energy you bring to your life, your family, your relationships, your work. It's the only thing that actually moves a boat. Number 2, that's the boat. The boat is the sacrifice. What are you willing to give up for something that you never had? A lot of people in this world really want things and they need things, but they're not willing to give up certain things to get those things. The third part is the compass. The compass is the direction of your life, set by the leader of your life, but also who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with elite people, you're going to go do elite things. If you surround yourself with bad people, you're probably going to get caught up in a lot of bad situations. See, when you row a boat, your back is to the future. Can't see it, can't control it, you don't even know what's coming. You don't know what calm seas or what storms are ahead of you. You just continue to keep your oar in the water in the present because that's the only thing you can actually control. You decide whether you pull your oars out of the water and quit and become a failure, or you continue to learn from your failing and just continue to row the boat. But you're looking at the past, which is the only thing you cannot change, but you can learn from. See, when you row the boat, everybody's got to be in one line. Everybody's got to be rowing in the same direction with the same speed and the same efficiency to get to point A to point B in the most efficient, fastest way possible. Row the boat, everybody.
Yes, go Gophers, right? You see this jersey here behind me. That's my alma mater. Okay, so I'm biased. I put that video in for a number of reasons, but you guys have already heard that language in your own company. Row the boat, right? Every single team member is involved from the bottom up in the practicing of a belief system. Now, why did I show you that footage of Coach PJ Fleck? Because I want to give you the evidence and the proof that it actually results in improved performance and wins. Okay, when I played, my last year at Minnesota was 2003. And in 2003, we had one of the best teams in the history of the school. And we went 10 wins and 3 losses. And since 2003, nobody has been able to break 8 or 9 wins in a single season. And then PJ Fleck comes with a well-designed and decided culture around rowing the boat. Okay, now this is so practiced that every single player on the team has to have the speech that you just heard memorized. And they have to say yes to believing in that culture and to practicing all of the things that PJ puts in place in order for them to improve themselves and improve their performance on the field. And the result of that this last year was that the team went 11-2, and they destroyed Auburn in one of the biggest bowl games of the season. He's completely turned around the program because he's gotten an entire group, one of the most diverse communities in a locker room, to believe in the same system and commit themselves to that. And the result has been the complete turnaround of a program and the championship win of a bowl game. Now, this next example is interesting, okay? For those of you that don't know this sport, it's baseball. And they call it the American pastime because it's really one of the oldest organized sports in America. And this is a case study on the 2017 World Series champs, which is basically the team that wins the biggest game, the biggest championship in all of baseball. Now, the Houston Astros have been around for many years, but almost always forgotten because they haven't had the greatest organization. But that changed in 2017. And this entire article is written around the culture chemistry experiment that they went through as an organization to completely kind of redefine the culture and belief system of their locker room and of their administration. And the result of that was that they had won a championship. Now, if you follow sports and if you follow especially American sports and baseball, you're going to learn that that this completely changed in the last year, because what happened is we learned that a number of players and coaches began to practice beliefs around cheating being the way that they wanted to get success. And because of that, they were found out and they were stripped of their championship. They lost everything, including respect. So what started out as a glorious experiment about the power of a well-chosen and practiced culture turned into a great example of what happens when you begin to practice a belief system that is unfair, a belief system that really takes advantage of individuals. And it really led to the destruction of the team in 2019, and now they're going to have to rebuild to recreate that. So those are a few examples over the last 3-4 years that provide us with some evidence for the importance of a high-performing culture. And guys, this is really what it comes down to. This is very personal to me, because this is the photo that was taken immediately after we won the Super Bowl, and I just think it highlights what Coach Dungy was set out to achieve, which is to create the strongest team family that he possibly could, that leads to the ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl and hoisting up high the Lombardi Trophy. And this is really a celebration of culture. And so if you look at this picture and look around, it was really interesting, because Coach Dungy came into the locker room after we won the game, and you couldn't even move in there. There were so many press, so many photographers, and Coach Dungy just put his hands in the air, didn't say a word. He just put his hands up in the air, and everything got quiet. He just had that ability. Everything got quiet. And he said, guys, we're going to finish the season the same way we started the season, and that's coming together as a family and giving thanks for everything we have. And he asked all of the photographers to put their cameras down. But I'm so glad that one of those photographers disobeyed Coach Dungy. Now, that's not a behavioral principle that we're trying to coach or teach, but I'm so glad it happened, because he captured the culture of Indianapolis, right? 53 guys from 53 different parts of the country, 53 different backgrounds, economic situations, family situations, religious views, political positions. You can't get more diverse than an NFL locker room. And it's a beautiful representation of what happens when you bring 53 of these unique individuals together, all united by the same belief system, resulting in the ultimate win for Indianapolis. And I believe you're capable of this in any industry and in any organization in the world. All right, so I've given you a template. I've talked with you about what it is we believed about those principles, how we practice those principles to get results. And now what I want to do is focus you really on the 4 core belief systems of Indianapolis. And then we'll conclude and open it up to some Q&A. I'm looking forward to that. So this Champions Way really revolves around what I call the 4 L's: listening, learning, language, and love. What does it mean to be a champion listener? What does it mean to be a champion learner? Someone who is always trying to be a student of the game, or a student of what their role is on a team. What does it mean to be a champion language user? Someone who communicates with clarity. And really, what does it mean to truly value and respect your team members? And when you begin to practice these things at a very high level, how over time that really builds a morale that you can't dismantle. And that really is what makes success sustainable over time. So we've got a great quote here: the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. Okay, so if you know the game of football, this question will make more sense, and then I can explain what I'm talking about to those that don't. But I'm going to ask this question: what do you think the most critical and important part of an NFL offensive play is? What is the most important part to run a successful play in the NFL? Just think about that for a second. What is the most, a lot of times people are saying, they talk about communication, they talk about teamwork, they talk about efficient play. And the answer in Indianapolis was the huddle. The huddle, believe it or not. Now, for those of you that understand what a huddle is, you're going to know what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't, the huddle is something that happens at the beginning of every single play on an NFL offense. It's where the 11 players come together in a very tight formation. Usually that makes a circle. It's a very tight formation. And this is where our leader, our offensive leader, the quarterback, is able to distribute all of the information we need in order to go run a successful play. Now, as you can imagine, nobody's paying attention. When you're watching an NFL football game at a party, nobody's getting excited about the players getting in the huddle. But what you have to understand, especially in the Peyton Manning offense, which is known to be one of the most difficult and intricate offenses because of the audible system that he runs, which I'll explain to you here in a little bit. But the huddle was the most important part of every single play because it's where we get the information we need to go be successful. Okay? Now, Peyton always used to say that the most important thing for an offense is to be 11 minds together as one. 11 minds together as one. And you can't achieve that if you don't have empathy. And as I said to you earlier, this is an opportunity to really show you what the culture of the huddle was, which will highlight some of these principles. So the culture of the huddle in Indianapolis revolved around 3 different philosophies: stop, look, and care. Our offensive coordinator demanded that when Peyton Manning came into the huddle, everything stops. All the talking, what happened on the last play, what's the next play going to, everything stops, right? It was an act of selflessness to give our leader the stage of speech. Everything stops when Peyton Manning steps into the huddle. The second is look. It's the pursuit of information, right? When you're playing in front of 80,000 people, you don't often hear everything that comes out of your quarterback's mouth. So we were told to look also at his mouth, to use multiple senses in order to gather information. Not only listen, but look at the words that he's delivering with his mouth. That is the pursuit of information. Stop is to give your leader or your team member the stage of speech. Look is the pursuit of information, showing your quarterback that you're paying attention, that what he has to say matters. And the last is care. Now, this is where you bring empathy into listening. Okay, this is where 11 minds together is radically important, because we can't achieve a successful play if I am not empathetic as a tight end to the other 10 members of the offense. And what I mean by that is each one of those players has a very specific role. They have a very specific responsibility on that play that determines what I do. And if I'm not empathetic to what their responsibilities are, I'm never going to be able to do my job to the best of my abilities. So stop, look, and care is the belief system of the huddle. And it was so important, you guys, that we practiced it the first 5 minutes of every practice that I was ever a part of. That might sound silly, but they wanted for the huddle, the culture of the huddle, to become second nature. So we would start on the sideline, they would blow the whistle, we would run out onto the field, we'd get into the huddle, we'd practice stop, look, and care, we'd run back to the sideline. And then the whistle would blow again, and we'd go do that over and over for 5 minutes. And it just became second nature, and something that led us to being incredibly successful on an offensive football field. Another quote to support that: the ability and willingness to listen with empathy is often what sets a leader apart. Hearing words is not adequate. The leader truly needs to work at understanding the position and perspective of the others involved in the conversation. And now you have to understand, we use the word leader a lot. And in sports, every single team member is expected to be a leader. All 53 members of the team are expected to be leaders. We're all leaders that are a part of every organization. And so each of us has the responsibility to practice in Indianapolis, to practice these in order to improve performance. What does it mean to be a champion learner? I love this quote from Lou Holtz, an incredibly successful college football Hall of Famer. I never learn anything by talking. I only learn things when I ask questions. So, you know, I'd find this really interesting to be in a room with you guys because of just the international nature of the audience. But usually when I ask the question, how many of you have ever felt insecure about asking a question? And you'd be surprised at how many people raise their hands, right? It's for some reason, it's a part of the insecure nature that we have as human beings, that, you know, for whatever reason. I mean, I've been in situations where I had a great question that I wanted to ask in a team meeting, and I didn't put my hand up because I didn't want to come across as a fool, or that I didn't already understand that, when I should have asked that question, right? So Coach Dungy was committed to creating a culture of asking great questions. And it revolved around the culture of learning at Indianapolis, which was execution, evaluation, and questions, right? Questions, execution, and evaluation. So let me take you through kind of what an everyday schedule is like in the NFL, and show you how we practice that belief system. So you're going to begin to see the repetition of questions, execution, and evaluation. We'd always start out with treatment. This is the time where we would get our bodies ready for the day. It's a long season, and so treatment is always very important. We'd go into breakfast and a workout. You have to maintain strength throughout the season. And then we get into our meetings, and this is really where the practicing of this belief system begins, right? This was an opportunity for us to evaluate film. And then we would always end with a period of asking questions. Now, how did he hold us accountable to this ability to ask questions? It's really to create an environment where there is no foolish question. And he did that by demanding that all players had to ask a question, because we can't afford to ask questions on game day. We have 16 games and not enough time. So ask your questions now. And so he created that system at the end of every meeting. You had to ask a question. So as you can see, we go into our offensive meetings and we evaluate more film and end with a period of asking questions. 10 a.m., we break up into our individual team rooms, tight ends with tight ends. Each position would go to its own room. And that meeting would end with a period of asking questions. Finally, a chance to execute the answers to the questions we asked. And that is through our walkthrough, where we were able to walk through every single play in slow motion so that we completely could grasp what the execution of that play needed to be. That always followed with an hour of lunch and media, back into an individual meeting room where we would evaluate that walkthrough footage, and we would end with a period of asking questions. And that led to our team practice, which usually was about 3 hours long, and was the ultimate opportunity for us to execute on all of the questions and all of the evaluation that we experienced earlier in the day. And that would end with our final period of the day, which was another individual team meeting where we would evaluate the practice film and have a chance to ask questions. So as you can just see, the culture of being a champion learner was incredibly important and practiced throughout every single day of the week. Let me show you what our Super Bowl schedule actually looked like. And you can see how every minute of the day is defined and very intentional. All of the highlighted areas are the areas where we were practicing questions, execution, and evaluation. You only had 1 week down in Miami, and every single day was purposefully designed. It's really hard to explain how significant this game actually is. You know, I'll never forget, every single one of the players was given a key to their own Cadillac Escalade to drive around Miami during the week. Whenever we would go to our practice facilities, they would shut down the most major 5-lane highway that goes north and south through the state of Florida. And it was so funny because we would literally be the only automobile on the road. Our buses would be the only transportation on the highway. And you'd look out the window and you'd see exit and entrance ramps just completely filled with people giving us the finger because they're so mad that they can't get to work on time because a football team needs the entire highway. So, you know, it was such an incredible experience, and you realized really quick when you were there how significant it really was. But as you can see, we treated that week just like we did any other week, revolving around the belief system of what it means to be a champion learner. Okay. And that's really what the culture of learning is in Indianapolis. It revolves around these 3 things. Create an environment that celebrates pursuing clarity. Execution is the intentional application of those answers received, and then evaluation, creating opportunities in your organization to evaluate yourself and your team members in the right way with the intention of improving performance. The best leaders are insatiable learners. Peyton Manning is known for that. That's one of the things that I think defines him as being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. People say that nobody out-prepared Peyton, and I know for a fact that that was something that he committed to. That was a part of his own individual culture, was nobody was going to out-prepare me. No, I am always going to be the best student of the game. One example of that, in my final year in Indianapolis, I remember coming into the practice facility and noticing facilities were securing video cameras to every single goalpost that we had on the practice facility, which I think was somewhere between 6 and 8 goalposts. And I remember asking the question, you know, what are you guys doing? Why are you securing these cameras to the goalposts? And they said, well, these cameras are only for Peyton. Peyton wants us to shoot video. He wants us to film his eyes on every single play that he runs in practice so that he can take that film and go analyze it. You guys, that's unheard of. That's incredible. Okay. He understands that the defense is always reading his eyes. Okay. And he wants to make sure that he's not giving away where he's going to throw the football. And so he, as a student of the game, as an insatiable learner, he had them put video cameras on every single goalpost so that he could study where his eyes were on every single play. And that really results in what makes him one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. which is a nice transition into my favorite section here, you guys. Now, this is language. What does it mean to be a champion communicator? Words are important. It's through our words that we communicate our intentions. They are the main tools that we have for sharing our vision with our team. Now, I think sometimes we assume that, you know, when we're presenting, when we're talking to people about our ideas, that the way we present that, the words that we choose, the sentences that we create are just going to be understood by everybody the way that we want them to be understood. And that's just not the truth. Our words are important, and how we choose them and why we choose them matter. And this became really evident to me in Indianapolis because of the intricate audible system of Peyton Manning that I called the language of Manning. Okay, we would have specific individual meetings every day to go over the language of Manning, the encyclopedia of Manning, where he would bring in this leather-bound, thick notebook that I'm sure was locked away in a vault. And he would open it up, and there would just be word after word, code word after code word after code word that was attached to a play that we had to understand, because every single word that he says in a football game has a very specific meaning that tells us exactly what we need to do on a specific play, right? It was so intricate that each play had 3 different code words for that one play, and it had 3 different hand signals for that one play. For example, as a tight end, right, I would have the responsibility to go and to run routes in order to catch the ball. On each one of those routes, there were 3 different words that he could say in order to tell me to run that route, or there were 3 different hand signals he could give in order to tell me to run that route. And that's how important it was for our team to understand every single word of Peyton Manning. And so listen carefully as I take you through a video here highlighting the language of Manning.
We're going dice right, ice cream, alert, 654, Jose. Okay, 1-0.
Peyton Manning and the Colts run the NFL's most sophisticated offense.
255.
Each play can be called or changed at the line. That forces the Colts linemen to wait
Chocolate.
and wait until Peyton finally makes up his mind. I wonder if they ever think, just snap the damn ball.
Check Brown, Richmond, 96 double. 96 double. Check, oh, what a flare.
His goal is not to get the perfect play. It's to get out of a bad play.
Hot.
And more times than not, they do that.
Peyton drops, looks, fires, touchdown, Randy Wayne!
It's a ballet that drives people crazy. You know, as you say, just snap the damn ball. They'll do it when they're damn well pleased.
Check. One left. One left.
It started way back, you know, kind of, I guess, around my second year with Tom Moore. We kind of sat down and just put some code words together and things that kind of made sense. But it has taken off from that.
That's right. Short ox. Richmond, Florida, Buffalo, 97 double. Louisville Soul Train. They're purple, Buddha Raiders.
It's not about trickery.
Purple, Buddha Raiders.
But it does take constant communication.
So Peyton was lying a little bit there. It definitely was about trickery to some degree. But the truth is that every single one of those words meant something very specific. Okay, so let me just break that down for you, just to kind of give you a deeper understanding. So that video started out coming out of the huddle that we talked about earlier, where Peyton told us in the huddle, dice right, 654, Jose on nothing. Dice right, 654, Jose on nothing. Now, what do you think the most important word is in that entire delivery? Dice right, 654, Jose on nothing. Because that is an actual play. But there's one word in there that is more important than any other. Dice right, ice cream, 654, Jose on nothing. Well, the answer is the word nothing. Because the word nothing tells us that he is going to try to draw the defense off sides. Okay, we're going to go to the line of scrimmage. We're going to put our hand down. He's going to get underneath the center, and he's going to start calling plays, and he's going to try to get them to jump offside, to have a penalty. And so the word nothing tells us, hey guys, don't move. Don't you dare move, because I'm going to try to draw them off sides. So even though he calls a real play, he uses one word that we have to hear in order to know that he's not actually going to run that play. He's going to try to draw the defense offside. Now, he also put a code word in there, ice cream. Dice right ice cream, 654 Hosea, nothing. Ice cream tells us that when we're at the line of scrimmage, he's going to give us a reminder not to move. And the reminder with ice cream is that he will give us any flavor of ice cream at the line of scrimmage. Okay, so if you remember from watching the video, he came up to the line of scrimmage and he said, chocolate, chocolate. Okay, that's reminding us, hey guys, don't move. I'm going to try to draw them off sides. Okay, said hut, hut, but the defense doesn't move. But their safeties, the defense's players in the backfield, they shift and they tell Peyton what they're going to do. Now the master chess player can go to work. Okay, now Peyton Manning begins his audible system, right? And he starts yelling out, Brown Richmond, as he goes up and down the offensive line. Brown Richmond, these are the big linemen that sit in front of him that are there to protect him. Brown Richmond is a very specific protection. It tells each of those members exactly what they need to do so that Peyton doesn't get hit. And then he goes to the wide receivers on the right, 96 right double, right? 96 right double. That's telling them exactly the routes they need to run. If they can't hear him, he's also giving them the hand signal for 96 right double. Then he comes back and he turns around to the running back who's behind him and he says, run a flare, run a flare. The flare is a wide bending route to the sideline. He's kind of the escape goat, if you will. If nobody else is open, then Peyton will throw over to the wide flare. And then if you didn't see it, and I'm sure you didn't because it's really hard to notice, when Peyton came back to the line of scrimmage, he gave a little hand signal like this to the receiver on the far left. That hand signal tells that receiver to run a slant route. 3 yards straight up, 45-degree angle across the football field. All of that communication, every word means something, right? And the whole time, because of how the defense moved, he adapted to that, how they moved. He knew that he was going to throw a slant route on the backside. And he didn't even say anything for that. He just gave the signal. He got under the center, said, hut, came back, used his eyes to trick the safeties, and then came back to our wide receiver, Reggie Wayne, on the backside, running a slant for a touchdown. You guys, what you saw on that video happened 65 to 75 times a game. That's how much communication is happening on an NFL football field in our offense, where every single word matters. The content, purpose, and delivery of Peyton Manning's information to us was the most critical part of us achieving what we were capable of achieving as an offense. So I would submit to you that if you practice these three things as a communicator in your team, you will see the level of understanding and performance on being a communicator improve. Asking yourself, what are you saying? Why are you saying it? And how are you saying it is critically important to how you deliver your content to your team members. And that's something that we practiced every single day. So on to the last, and really, I think one of the most foundational differences about this team is, what does it truly mean to love, value, and respect your team members? I love this because it's always what makes people feel really uncomfortable at first, and usually where you get your eye rolls, but I'm going to back it up with some incredible proof. Love empowers, creates, and releases. Most of all, it inspires people to apply themselves, and it frees them to reach their potential. All right, now obviously we're not talking about romantic love here. We're talking about brotherly love. We're talking about value, deep value and respect, right, for your team members, and the effect that has on your relationships in your organizations. Now, how did we practice that in Indianapolis? We practiced it with a belief system that was designed around getting 53 players to trust and hope in each other. We have the only Super Bowl ring to have our culture belief system engraved in the side of the ring, and it's the word faith. Now, this has nothing to do with religion. This is based on the acronym freedom for all individuals to trust and hope in each other. The whole team, right? How do we get all individuals of a team to trust in each other and to hope in each other? And if we can do that, that becomes a family that nobody can dismantle, and it leads to incredible performance on a football field. Okay, here is a great industry example of this. I was working with Toyota Denso in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I was with one of their elite lean manufacturing experts. This is a guy that goes to Japan and works with the masters over in Japan. And when he began talking to them about the importance of morale, they gave an incredible example of what their belief system is. And it revolves around this Japanese phrase, ningen sei sanshu. And it means literally to hold precious that which makes a person human. That is a part of the actual written out design and distributed belief system of the Toyota way, which, by the way, in 2019, they posted an annual revenue of $273 billion. Okay. And how they achieve morale, how they achieve cohesiveness is by holding precious that which makes every team member a human being. The human condition matters. And if we can pour into it and make it significant, that is someone that's going to give you everything they have every single day they come into work. That's the kind of thing that builds trust, it builds unity, and empowers others to reach their potentials, which leads to commitment, loyalty to the team, leaders in the belief system. And that ultimately results in the champion's way, which is to really build unity and create positive engagement across the entire organization. Two final pieces of evidence that are right up your alley because they're individual statistics. I wanted to show the career statistics of Tony Dungy, okay? In 1996, he left the Minnesota Vikings as defensive coordinator to become the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a really hurting organization. And he had an uphill battle because he was going to introduce this belief system, and he was going to do his best to get them to begin to believe in it. Now, the first year, as you can see in 1996, was a challenge. They were only 6-10. But notice what happens over the next 12 years of Coach Dungy's head coaching career. Not a single losing season for the next 12 years. And it includes the ultimate season in winning an NFL championship. Friends, culture matters, and it's a difference maker. And it's hard to argue the statistics of Tony Dungy. Now, let me compare that to the two teams that I played for, because Cincinnati is a team that has really struggled for many years. I don't think they've won a playoff game in over 25 years. And so to go from a championship culture to a culture that has really struggled was difficult, but it taught me a lot about the importance and the ripple effect that chosen culture has. Now take a look. This is the same 13 years of Coach Dungy's career, okay? Coach Dungy, 139, 69-0, and 11 winning seasons. Cincinnati Bengals, 80, 127-1, with 1 winning season. I submit to you guys, it had nothing to do with talent. I went from Peyton Manning to a Heisman Trophy winner in Carson Palmer, an incredible quarterback. We had some of the greatest talent in Cincinnati. So what is the difference? If it's not talent, what is it? It is the practicing of a shared belief system that leads to a unified and cohesive culture. And when you look at the New England Patriots of the NFL, the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, then the list goes on and on. Okay, when you look at the teams that have won Super Bowls and continue to win Super Bowls, they each have their own individual culture that was decided, designed, deployed, and directed. And you have an incredible opportunity in your organization to do the same thing. And I submit to you, if you do it, if you take it seriously, you're going to reach every goal that you want to reach, and you're going to win in ways that you never expected to win. And I'm excited to see you guys do that. So that is the Champion's Way. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you. What do you got for me?
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Such a great story, Ben, as amazing as I remember it. Lots of things resonated for me. And I know the team as well. We got a bunch of questions. I'm going to start off with some of the easy ones because we have sports nerds. So there's a couple of sports nerds questions in here. How was playing with the great Fitzpatrick after Carson was hurt in '08? Did you prefer playing with Palmer or Fitz?
That is awesome. Did that person go to Harvard? Is that why they're asking that question?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
So, that transition was obviously it was difficult for Carson. He had a pretty serious elbow injury. But I think Ryan Fitzpatrick surprised everybody. He was a backup quarterback from Harvard. Not a lot of people knew much about him. But here's a guy that in the background was preparing as equally to Carson Palmer. And he stepped in and began to really do things that nobody expected. And so I think because of that, he gained a lot of players' respect. And so it was an easy transition to follow the leadership of Fitzpatrick, even when your main quarterback goes down due to injury.
All right, let me get another sports one in here. What do you think made Peyton Manning the type of player he was?
Well, Peyton Manning was bred for that position. His dad Archie was a great NFL quarterback that played a long time, so he really grew up in a very competitive and elite football culture just within his family. The other thing that's really unique about Peyton that you wouldn't really know if you didn't spend time with him is he has an incredible capacity for memory. It's really kind of almost photographic in nature. And that I think is something that really allows him to create unique competitive advantages on the field. I remember being in a play against the Atlanta Falcons, and I was on the left side of the line, and we got onto about the 5-yard line, and Peyton read the defense, okay, and they lined up in a position that we weren't prepared for. But they were lined up in a position that had one play that we could run against that position from something we learned 2 seasons prior. And it was a play called Dungy. Okay, and we didn't practice it. We haven't practiced Dungy in 2 years. And he gets up to the line of scrimmage, and that strong safety comes down and goes into the position where this play works. So he looks over to me, Nancy, and he says, Dungy. And he looks at me like, do you remember? Right? Because this wasn't a part of the game plan. But it just kind of goes to show you, he was an elite player who has an elite mind, and really just, you can't get more professional on the field and off the field than Peyton Manning.
Hard to argue he wasn't one of the best for sure. Even though he wasn't a Chicago Bear, it's okay. Sad now. Speaking of Dungy, how did Marvin Lewis's coaching philosophy compare to Dungy's?
You know what? There's a lot of mutual respect there, and there were some good similarities. I would say that from a coaching perspective, there was a lot of similarities. I think administratively, the two organizations were very different. And so some of the constraints culturally that Marvin Lewis faced were nothing of his fault, but really due to kind of the belief system that was being practiced from the ownership down, which kind of suppressed and made some of the things that they wanted to do as coaches really difficult. And also, you as coaches, you have to work with the talent that you have, right? And so that talent acquisition that we went through in Cincinnati was different than it was in Indianapolis. And so, the owner of the team, Mike Brown, was, he wanted to give people chances, even if they had off the field problems. So, where you go from Indianapolis, which was one of the most well-behaved team in all of football, never got in trouble, to Cincinnati, which had, an incredible amount of off the field problems. We lost players due to off the field incidences. And so you can just see there's just a drastic difference in how that works. But pure coaching style, Marvin was somebody that treated his players with respect, and at the same time, demanded excellence.
All right, there's lots of questions. Lots of people commenting they really enjoyed the presentation, so I have to make sure I say that. When you were at the Colts, they were a winning organization. If you were on a losing streak, how did Coach Dungy keep things together? And also, how did the coach feel? How did the coach deal when a player was cut or traded or was minimizing disruption to a key element, maintaining a strong family culture?
Yeah. Awesome. Great questions. So the first question is that we would typically, and I know this may sound elementary, but we had this philosophy that when things began to fall apart, we would always go back to the fundamentals and techniques of the game. The things, the simple, well, not simple, but the things that are really foundational for us to be successful. Sometimes you get into certain games and you try new things and you get a little bit more excited. You step out, you innovate too much, right? Before you've actually tested it. And you can begin to,
never do that.
Yeah, right. I know. And you can begin to struggle because it doesn't work. And so oftentimes in that situation, we would go back to the foundational plays that we have, that we know we can run incredibly well anytime against any team. And that would really kind of ground us again and bring us back down to a level of confidence. I think that gave the team a lot of support. And, thankfully in Indianapolis at the times that I was there, we didn't really have to deal with that, right? Because we were 13-0 one season. We just had an incredible team, but we did have to deal with a couple of personality issues. I'll never forget our place kicker, Mike Vanderjack. He was there before Adam Vinatieri, and Mike was, he had an ego on him, and he was a guy that could go against the flow or the belief system, if you will. And I'll never forget that he made the mistake of saying some negative things about Peyton on a radio talk show while he was on the team, and that was the end of his career in Indianapolis, because you don't say something like that to your quarterback. But it was a culmination of a number of things. But I think what it really comes down to is holding players accountable to the culture compact of Indianapolis. And Tony was very clear. If you're going to be a Colt, you have to do it the Colts way, right? Yeah. And if you don't do it the Colts way, and you continue to not do it the Colts way, then you won't be a Colt, and we'll find other talent. And they did.
Wow. Well, if we don't mind going into a little bit more overtime, there's lots of questions. So let me get through a couple more of these, if you don't mind. All right. How much focus was there on player performance data during your NFL career, and how did that focus on data evolve from your playing days to modern day?
Okay, one more time.
How much focus was there on player performance data during your career, and then how has that focus on data evolved from your playing days in modern day?
Okay.
Because of course we're going to ask that question.
You have to ask the question, and here's the answer. So I would say that the level of importance on individual performance data is the same. I would say what's changed is the kind of data now that you can provide to teams has completely expanded in really new and exciting ways. So when you would go into our scouting department offices, you would see entire walls filled with data and statistics of individual performance players. Right now, this is more foundational stuff like speed and agility times and strength and things of that nature. Whereas today, now we can go with our wearables and with all of the unique data points that we can extract. We can understand a player's VO2 max, which is how much oxygen is getting into the blood. We can take a look at we can take a look at hydration. We can take a look at cognitive abilities, and all of these things now are becoming ways in which teams are beginning to make draft choices. And so it's completely expanded.
Wow. So I know this one person gave 4 questions, but let me bounce around a little bit. So this is a good question. Let me see if I can interpret a little bit. Basically, the question is around how do you break down the silos when you have different teams coming together around a certain goal? Like, how do you go from my goal and how I'm measured, like as a tight end, versus how Peyton's managed, so that you collectively come together for success?
I love that question. So, one interesting question that I, out of my experience in Indianapolis, that I ask organizations is, can you define to me what does it mean to win in your organization? So if I were to ask all of Stats Perform employees, what does it mean to win? Would you get a unified answer back? Probably
Probably not yet.
Probably not yet, right? And so one thing that was so specific in the NFL is every single aspect to the game, it has a definition for what it means to win, right? So how they overcome the siloing effect is to define those things for you. What does it mean to win on first downs? What does it mean to win on 3rd and 7s? And that is individual as well. What does it mean as a tight end to win on this play in this location on the field? And so each player then can understand exactly what is expected of them in every situation, and they can tell you what the goal is in every situation. And so then obviously there is that philosophical element to your individuality on in a team environment. And that's always going to be, there's always going to be tension there, right? Because you are always performing to keep your job. And even though you're a part of a team, there's somebody always behind you that's wanting to take your job. And so there is just some natural, and I think healthy tension that exists within the culture of sports that you have to deal with on that.
That's a great question. All right, let's go a little bit more personal.
Okay.
Great presentation. I've learned a lot from your success and experience at crushing end to your career. How do you utilize your values to overcome a disappointment and build a new career?
Oh man. Well, let me practice being vulnerable with you guys, because it's not been easy. You spend your whole life in a sport, and that sport really becomes your identity. And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, retiring at 29 years old, I went into a bit of an identity crisis, and it's really taken me the better part of 8 to 10 years to really figure out, who I am as a businessman, who I am as a father, and there definitely are challenges along that path. It's interesting because, typically if you graduate college, you hit the working world at 21, 22 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and you have that first decade to figure all those things out. And then you kind of get into your stride in your 30s, and then you're hopefully cruising in your 40s because you've found your passion and you're killing it. And I'm a decade behind all of that. So this last period for me has been a bit challenging. But for me, it's going back to all those life lessons that I learned in sports, learned from being a part of a team, that I've discovered I can apply in my life as I did apply on the football field. And that's kind of what's in part, Nancy, giving me a passion to want to share that story and hopefully encourage other organizations and their team members, that they can win with culture as well.
And it's a great story. And a follow on to that, if somebody asked if you could choose one, NFL or music, what would you choose?
Well, music would have a lot less injuries.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't have had as many concussions. So that would have been a good reason. I've been so blessed to, in kind of the diversity of my passions, to experience some really cool things. And, music actually for me was a part of my family growing up. And I was classically trained growing up, and it led into, professional performance as I was playing in the NFL, and I had a record deal, and so it was a legitimate opportunity to do something very unique. Most people don't know this, but my very first play in the NFL was not as a football player; it was as a singer. I was asked to perform the American national anthem at the first preseason football game of my career against the Buffalo Bills. So 75,000 Indianapolis fans saw me first as a singer than they did as a football player. So it's tough for me because my answer is both. I don't know. I couldn't choose one over the other, but
I think that's a good answer. How do you find the culture you learned in football has changed how you do things in real life?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Look, I can tell you as a father, when I look at my personal culture, the one that I'm trying to create for my family and for myself today, like, when I ask myself those questions, what does it mean to be a champion listener, learner, language user, and someone who values people deeply? That is so related to what it means to be a great father. And when I look at the kind of man that I want to show my daughters, every single one of those plays a very intentional role. I mean, listening with four girls is so important because everything that they're experiencing is incredibly deep and emotional, and they want to talk to me about it all. And I have to do a really good job, of listening. But when I'm empathetic to them, they experience a dad that they believe truly cares about what they're saying, and that is essential in the development of them as young women.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, we have so many questions. Let me try and do a couple more.
I've got no time constraints. So.
All right, so let's go with, let's try this one. It must have been difficult to leave an organization and culture you respected and allowed you to reach your pinnacle. Talk about that decision, but leaving that organization that.
Oh man, it's like, you really just kind of have to say what's obvious there. And it really comes down to money. But here's the thing. I say that in humility, right? Because when you step outside of collegiate sports, when I was playing, where obviously there's no money involved, it changes everything, because now this really becomes your job. And I could have stayed in Indianapolis, but it was such a great financial opportunity for me to, take care of my family, that I had to take that, but the mission in it though, Nancy, is I remember getting a call from Coach Dungy after I made the decision. And he said, hate to lose you. At the same time, that's a team that really needs to have players of integrity and character. And I think that if we can see the silver lining in that, it's a good thing that you're going. And so there is there's a mission behind everything. And that's kind of how I chose to look at my time in Cincinnati, even though it ended with concussions.
That's a great answer. I'm bouncing around a bit. So looking at the recent contracts, like the Mahomes extension,
Unreal.
How does a different level of income affect the culture of the locker room, and how do you balance that? Kind of the next on to that last question.
Well, look, Coach Dungy always talked about wanting to make just decisions that don't become distractions in the locker room. And I don't think I don't think that necessarily the monetary value, because players are always used to being in a locker room with the top 6 to 8 players that are all making a ridiculous amount of money, right? But when that money begins to affect the draft your drafting ability, when that money begins to affect other players' incentive packages, or now you begin to get into a situation where you might be creating some tension that you can avoid. So it'll be interesting in the Mahomes situation. I think what's most radical about that, Nancy, is I think he's guaranteed something like $162 million. So if he breaks his toe tomorrow and it gets infected and they got to cut it off and he can't play football anymore, he gets $162 million, right? So it's, that's guaranteed money in the NFL is always kind of the most important, negotiation part of a contract. And this is the highest that it's ever been.
Absolutely. Let me ask a question from a rugby fan here.
Awesome.
So, not really well versed in the NFL, but what really struck me was the detailed analysis, more so the culture of your story. In rugby terms, I've seen this a lot. So you mentioned that you are a rugby fan as well. Did you ever try the game and get involved around the USA Eagles by chance? How would you compare the two games? As it's always a big discussion if players can dominate rugby coming from football.
Great question. Love rugby. I'm actually, one of my best friends is from Cape Town, South Africa, and he grew up in the professional leagues there. And so I've, just naturally, I'm a South African rugby fan who just won the World Cup this last year. I think there's a ton of similarities. I think when you think about, the offensive line, one of the similarities in rugby is the scrum, where you get these group of guys, without pads that are getting incredibly low to the ground, and they're all like locking in their shoulders. And the goal is to, who can drive the other members and, and get the rugby ball from underneath the scrum. And so there's a lot of similarities. I do think I think pads change everything. I'm trying to remember what the stats were on this, because I looked it up recently, but the amount of G forces is like 4 to 5 times in the NFL that it is in an actual rugby hit. And I don't know if I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you put on a helmet and shoulder pads, you just stop carrying. There's nothing there's nothing in you that's going to hold you back from running as fast as you possibly can into another human being. But love rugby, man. Just incredible athletes.
All right, so now let's move to our cricket fan. We often hear about trying to focus on things you can control in sport, focus on the next ball in cricket, on the next point in tennis, well, maybe they're not a cricket fan, maybe they're all sports, on the next point in tennis, on the next play in football, to trust the process. How do you reconcile that with lofty ambitions of winning the Super Bowl or going to space?
Listen, you don't go to space without every single screw that's been put into that spacecraft. You don't go to, me being on a Super Bowl championship team actually started in 5th grade in Hastings Little Raiders football in Minnesota, right? It started with it's like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours belief that in order to become an expert at something, you have to have over 10,000 hours in it, so, everything really does come down from, you talk about the 1% playing in the NFL. Well, the 1% playing in the NFL started their football careers when they were in 3rd, 4th grade. That's when the actual playing of the game began, the understanding of the game, the understanding of the strategies, and the coaching actually began to happen. And so, the majority of players, at that level are going to be incredibly focused and coachable individuals that all take the responsibility of their position very importantly. And so I think it's what the culture, it's what a chosen culture does is it grounds you to take one play at a time. That's all you can do, one play at a time. At the same time, you want to have that overarching ultimate goal It's something to look up to, something to continue to strive for, something that every single member of your team is in unity about.
Mhm.
And then collectively you go out and you give everything you have on every play, and you leave the rest, right? You just surrender the game. It's all you can do. Just give your best on each play, and hopefully you win enough plays that can help you achieve the ultimate goal.
That's great. All right, let's do one more. There's still so many questions. I wish we had more time. What recommendation around company culture would you have for an organization like ours, Stats Perform, that's extremely global, with people, locations spread everywhere? We're literally like many companies coming together, especially during times like this with COVID causing us all to be spread out and really isolated.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about the huddle system. And I think what's really interesting, I've worked recently in healthcare, and you're seeing a lot of healthcare networks, especially within their nursing departments, practice a huddle system where they're constantly coming together, and they're spending time together every day and throughout the day, just refocusing on what their mission, vision, value is, and then going back out. And so I would say making sure that you're really developing that as an organization, and creating that unified belief system, I think is something to really consider. Or maybe it's what you would call a value system, but really finding what is that identity. What is the identity of Stats Perform internationally? What does that look like? So that all of those subcultures can buy into a value system that they believe in. And then within each of those subcultures and each of the unique locations across the world, you're going to have your own culture that is directly tied in and connected to that, to the umbrella culture of the organization. But again, you will have one by design or default. And so if you're going to have a culture, why not choose it and put some time into designing it and then practicing it?
And it's everyone's job to create and manage that culture. Everyone, not just leadership.
No, yeah, again, and that's something that's really important to understand. I tried to say that earlier, everybody is a leader, and it's important that every team member is a part of, the creation and practicing of that system. And really that's when I think you really begin to create the morale that it takes to become a sustainable and winning organization.
Which we definitely plan to.
I'm so excited for you guys. So excited.
So I know there's more questions, team. Thank you for your participation. And Ben, thank you so much. It was
thank you.
For us a great experience. I feel bad we couldn't do this in person. For those of you guys, hopefully someday we can. I think I came up to your belly button when we met.
Yeah.
It's a great interactive experience. Regardless, I think you did an amazing job considering you were talking to your computer. But there were many of us out here that truly enjoyed the talk today, and so we deeply thank you. And hopefully we can do this again. And team, thank you for your time. I think it was a great way for us to take a moment to celebrate a year of success coming together and having a great inspiration for that.
Awesome.
So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, guys. Congrats.